Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started on section 7.5, which is going to be installment buying. So as an overview, most people do installment buying on bigger purchases like a car. This is when you purchase an item and you make periodic payments or installments on it. There are advantages and disadvantages to this. You can purchase an item that you need and spend more time paying less amounts in order to complete your purchase, but you pay interest on the amount borrowed, so you may pay more than you originally thought you would. So there's pros and cons of installment buying versus buying something outright. Um, but most people do choose to installment buy just because a lot of times you may not have the money up front, but you could definitely pay it off over a specific amount of time, which makes it a lot easier, a lot more reachable for most people. So looking at fixed installment loans, we're going to go through some key terms. So when they come up later on, we know what we're talking about. You say a fixed installment loan is a loan repaid in equal payments. So that's what a fixed installment loan is. If you pay part of the cost at the time of the purchase, that's known as a down payment. The amount financed is the amount a borrower will pay the interest on, which will be the price of the item minus the down payment that you already spent. The total installment price is the total amount of money the buyer will ultimately end up paying, which is the total installment price is equal to the sum of all the payments they made plus the down payment that will take into consideration the interest. And the finance charge is the interest charged for borrowing the amount financed. So finance charge is the total installment price minus the price of the item. So those are all the typical terms we're going to hear and kind of their corresponding formulas as well. So we're going to go through a couple examples here to work it out. So as an example, Kat bought a car for $24,650 and her down payment was $6,000. The first question is, what was her amount financed? We said the amount financed was going to be the amount that you will actually pay interest on, meaning that it's going to be the amount of your item minus the down payment. So the car was $24,650 and her down payment was $6,000. So the amount financed will be $18,650. So that's how much Kat will actually pay interest on since she was able to pay $6,000 outright. Now we say she's going to pay $414 per month for 48 months. What is her total installment price? So her total installment price is going to be the sum of all of her payments plus the down payment, the money that she actually ends up spending. So we know that she has $414 per month for 48 months. So the sum of all her purchases would be $414 times 48 for 48 times. And this was given to us in the context of 4 years. We would convert that into months since we know her payment is per month and then calculate that out. And then add on her down payment, the money that she did put up front. So calculating the sum of all the payments, that comes out to about $19,872, which we add to the down payment to get our final total installment price of $25,872. That's pretty different than the original $24,650 that the car actually was worth. It was roughly an extra $1,000. So what's her finance charge? Her finance charge will be the amount of interest that she actually gained on this value. How much more did she actually end up paying versus the original amount of the car? So her finance charge ended up being $25,872 minus $24,650 to get $1,222 was her finance charge. That's how much extra money she ended up paying in interest. So those are some key terms we're going to go through and just their formulas. So we're a little bit familiar with the formulas as we go forward. So here we have annual percentage rate. So many lenders add upfront fees to a loan and then spread them over the life of the loan. So your interest rate is actually higher than what you were originally quoted for. Since this is very confusing, lenders are now required to disclose an annual percentage rate, or what's called the APR. And that reflects the true interest that you're actually being charged versus what they promised. So the math involved for computing the APR is extremely complicated, so we're going to use a table instead. And tables are most often provided to help you estimate that APR. So our table is this table here. We have the APR table. There's number of payments, which you'll follow on like the left column, and then the annual percentage rate is across the top. And then we have a finance charge per $100 of amount financed. So this is where those key terms are going to start popping up. Let's go back and look at the steps for using the APR table. So step 1, you need to find the finance charge per $100 borrowed using the following formula. You're going to find the finance charged divided by the amount that was financed. So we know those values, we know what they're equal to because we saw that on our key terms before. We'll take that percent and multiply it by 100. This will give us our amount per $100. Step 2, you find the row in the table marked with the number of payments and move to the right until you find the amount closest to the number that you got from step 1. Step 3, the APR to the nearest half percentage is at the top of the corresponding column. If you can't quite land directly on a value, you'll just estimate the value in between. So that's what we're going to do when we do an example. So let's take another look at our APR. We will come back to this, but here we see that finance charge per $100 of amount financed. So let's say you were being charged about $2 for your number of payments being 6. So you would go across until you found the value of $2. Well, it looks like it would be right in between here. We have $1.90 and $2.05. So $2 lands anywhere in between this range, so I know my APR is actually somewhere between 6.5% and 7%. Maybe I was promised 5.5%, but I can see I'm actually being charged this amount instead. That's how our APR table works. So let's go ahead and do an example to show this. So here's our example. Your transmission went out. Oh no. You get stuck with a $1,900 repair bill, but you can only handle paying $400 up front. They finance the rest for 2 years with a monthly payment of $67.34. So you're going to find the APR. So you're going to find how much percent, interest that you're actually paying on this. In this case, they didn't really promise you any specific interest rate, but they are just kind of slapping you with a monthly payment for a specific period of time. So you can figure out how much your interest rate is going to be. So, all right, we're going to go over to our notes to work on this problem. All right, so here's our problem, and I've written down the formulas that we needed to remember for this problem. So as a reminder, our example, transition right now, you have a $1,900 repair bill, you pay $400 up front, you are financed for 2 years with a monthly payment of $67.34. So we need to start off because we said that to solve this, we would have to divide the finance charge by the amount financed and then multiply that value by 100 to get the value of our APR to use for our table. So we have to find the finance charge and the amount financed. As a side note, you'll commonly see finance charge and finance charged used pretty interchangeably. There's really no difference. It's just what type of language they decide to use. So you'll see that kind of bounce around as well. All right. So we can find our amount financed fairly easily. It's our original price minus the down payment, which in this case, our down payment was going to end up being $400. That's how much we could pay up front. So the amount financed in this case was $1,900 minus the down payment of $400. So we can do that fairly easily. 1,900 minus 400 ends up being 1,500. So our amount financed was $1,500. So now we can find the finance charge. But we realize our finance charge is the total installment price minus the original price. We don't know the total installment price. The total installment price is the sum of the payments plus the down payment. So what we can do is we can find the total installment price, and that'll let us find the finance charge. So we'll find the total installment price, which you said is the sum of the payments plus the down payment. So we know we have a monthly payment of $67.34. So we need to know what is the sum of all of those payments at the end of the time frame, which for us is 2 years. So our sum of our payments, we'll take how much we're paying monthly, $67.34, and we'll multiply by the number of months. We're paying for 2 years. 12 months in a year makes it 24 months. So this is 24 months. That'll be the sum of the payments, and then plus our down payment, which we said was $400. So we can go ahead and calculate these values. We can figure this out. $67.34 times 24 is going to end up equaling $1,616.16, which we're then adding to 400. When we add 400, we end up getting $2,016.16. So that's our total installment price. Now we're going to subtract the amount financed from, we're going to subtract the total installment price and the original price. So we're going to go ahead and subtract those. So our finance charge, we have $2,016.16 minus the original, which was $1,900. So we find this value. This comes out to be $116.16. So there we go. We have our finance charge and we found out our amount financed. So for our steps on how to use the APR table, that was our first step. We wanted to find the finance charge per amount financed of $100. So we'll take that relationship and multiply it by $100. So that was our step one on that list on the last slide that we had. So we have finance charge divided by amount financed. We multiply by $100. So that means we're going to have $116.16 divided by the amount financed, which is $1,500. Whatever that value is, we multiply it by $100 to get our final amount. So we can use a calculator to go ahead and calculate this value. And this should come out to, and we'll round to the nearest cent, of course. This should come out to $7.74. So from step one, we found that for every $100 that was spent, there was about $7.74 extra for a finance charge. So we used our value from step one. So now we get to go to step two and find the APR value. All right, so here we are at our APR table. So our first thing here is to find the number of payments that we're actually making. We said we're making monthly payments for 2 years, which makes that 24 payments. 12 times in a year for 2 years, we make it 24. So we go to 24 and we're going to follow the row across. And remember, the value we found for the finance charge per $100 amount financed was $7.74. So we're trying to find that value in the row. So we follow down our row here for 24. We're in the $4, $5, $6. Here's $7, and then it goes to $8. So between $7.45 and $8, we have the value $7.74, somewhere in between. So the values that we're going to use to find our annual percentage rate are between 7% and 7.5%. And that's based on the value that we had from step 1 and following our APR table with finding the number of payments. So for our step 2, we know that our value is between 7 and 7.5%. Because at 7%, we had $7.45, and at 7.5%, we had $8. Let's go ahead and write that down in our notes. All right, so here we are back in our notes. For step 2, we just want to write down the information that we gathered. Step 2, we had that $7.74 from step 1 is between the $7.45 at 7% and $8 at 7.5% for 24 payments according to our APR table. So we know this information. Now our final step is to just try to estimate our actual APR percentage rate. So step 3 is you're estimating your actual rate. So if we look at $7.74 and we look at the range that we're looking at, $7.45 and $8, it's about a difference of about 55 cents. Then we have $7.74, which is going to be about roughly 29 cents more than $7.45 and about 26 cents less than $8. So in reality, $7.74 is pretty close to about the halfway mark between $7.45 and $8. This is all about really just estimation. So in this case, since our value is actually pretty close to about halfway between, we're going to estimate our APR being about halfway between those two percentage rates. So we can go ahead and write that out. Say since $7.74 is about halfway between $7.45 and $8, our rate will be halfway $7 and 7.5%. So now all I have to do is find a halfway point between 7 and 7.5%. But we can do this to find the average between the two. That would be taking 7, so we'll write AVG for average, would be taking the 7 plus 7.5 and dividing by 2. So you take your two values, add them together, and divide by 2. This gives us 14.5 divided by 2, which gives us 7.25%. And there would be our answer to our original question, which was find the APR based on all this information. So our annual percentage rate turned out to be about 7.25%. Now, that's how much that you are actually paying in interest. So maybe it comes down to one of those things where the company is promising you it's only 7% interest. Turns out it's really 7.25% interest. So it could be a little bit different than maybe what you were promised, or maybe you just weren't promised anything at all. But either way, That's how we find the annual percentage rate based on our APR table. So that's how you use the table. If you ever need to use it, it's always good to have it on hand to be able to look at it and follow these steps if you ever have a similar question like this. So, all right, that wraps up that example. Let's go ahead and go back on over to the lecture. All right, that was that example. So moving on, we can compute unearned interest and payoff amounts for a loan paid off easily. So one way to save money on a fixed installment loan is to pay it off as early as possible. The amount of the finance charge that's saved when a loan is paid off early is called unearned interest. So, for example, maybe you take out a loan and you're paying off a certain amount of interest for a specific period of time. And let's say maybe you get, your tax return, you come into a lump sum of money and you're like, just going to pay it off early. So you pay it off and you gain back some of your unearned interest. So there are two methods for actually calculating this unearned interest. It's called the actuarial method and the rule of 78. The actuarial method uses the APR table and the following equation. So we have this equation for the actuarial method. We have our formula here where we have U, which is the unearned interest, is equal to K, the number of payments remaining, excluding the current one, times big R, capital R, the monthly payment, times H, the finance charge per $100 for a loan with the same APR and K monthly payments. So you may have to use the APR table in order to find the value of H. So that's how we use the actuarial method. There is another method, like we said it's the rule of 78. So we can go ahead and look at that one as well. The rule of 78 doesn't use the APR table, just the following equation. We want to notice that the formula has the number of remaining monthly payments in the numerator and the original number of payments in the denominator. They are different. We have our formula here, U, unearned interest, is equal to F, the finance charge, times K, the number of remaining monthly payments, times K plus 1, divided by N, the original number of payments, times N plus 1. So that means that when the number of remaining payments gets smaller, so does the unearned interest. But the lenders collect more interest and less principal in the beginning of a loan. So when you first start paying towards a loan, one thing that happens is that you're paying a large amount of interest. If you are paying the same amount throughout a specific time frame and you're paying the exact same amount of money every single, let's say, month, in the beginning, since you owe so much more interest, those payments are paying off more interest than the original amount. You're paying like more interest, less principal. As you get close to paying off your amount as time goes on, as you get closer to the end, you end up paying more principal, less interest. Because your principal has gone down so much, you're not gaining as much interest on it anymore. So when you pay off a certain amount after a certain period of time, you're actually not saving yourself that much unearned interest anymore because those payments are mostly principal, not as much interest. So maybe you only gain yourself a couple extra dollars. At that point, maybe it was worth it to save that tax return for something else and then just continue making your normal payments. So being able to calculate how much money you would actually save by paying things off early is very worth it most of the time, especially when it comes to things like student loans. If you can manage to pay off student loans early, you can save yourself quite a bit of money. Or not. Maybe you won't save yourself that much money and maybe it's more worth it to just stick with your normal payments. So that's why we use the rule of 78 in the actuarial method to calculate unearned interest and see if it's worth it to pay off a loan early. So we're going to do an example together. Oh no, your transmission went out. Same question. You get stuck with a $1,900 repair bill. You can only handle paying $400 up front. They finance the rest for 2 years at the monthly payment of $67.34. You already found the APR from the last example, So we decided to use your tax refund to pay off the full amount of the repair with the 12th payment. So in 2 years, you're using your 12th payment to pay it off. Now find the unearned interest using the actuarial method and the rule of 78. We're going to use both. Since a lot of this is all about estimation, we'll see that these values are not going to be the same, although they will be very close. So let's go ahead and use both of these methods to try to figure out how much unearned interest we're actually going to save ourselves. All right, so here we are with our example. We have the same question as before, and we said that we're going to use the actuarial method and the rule of 78. So when we use the actuarial method, we have different variables. We have K, R, and H. The rule of 78 uses these variables F, K, and N. Now, one important thing is that for both of these formulas, K is the same. So it's the same value of K for each one. And we said that the value of K would be the number of payments that are remaining, not including the current. So we said that in this case, we're just told you're using your tax refund to pay off the full amount of the repair with the 12th payment. You had 24 payments. So on the 12th payment, not including this, there would be 12 more payments after the current one. So K would end up being 12. That's how many payments are left. It's the same value. All right, then we can continue to just fill in the information that we do have. We have R is going to be the monthly payment, which we already know it's given to us in the problem. The monthly payment is $67.34. So you can fill in that. Then for the rule of 78, the value of F, we said was our finance charge. We found that on our last example. Our last example told us the finance charge was $116.16. Right in here. So that's our finance charge. So we'll fill that in for F is $116.16. Then we have the value of H. We said H was going to be the value of our payments depending on the APR that we already found. So we need to find what is going to be the actual interest rate for the percentage that we found based on the remaining number of payments. So basically what we need to do to find H is go back to the APR table, find what should be around our 7.25% under 12 payments now instead of 24 payments. So we'll find that for H. And then just before we go and do that, there's one last thing. We have the value of N. N was the original number of payments, which we know was 24 payments monthly for 2 years. So we can fill in that information really quickly. It's 24 original payments. So we can go ahead and find H. And remember, H is going to be the actual finance charge per $100 of amount financed based on the percentage that we had from our previous example for now 12 payments. So let's go to the APR table and figure that one out. All right, so here we are back at the APR table. Now we said that we're going to use the same percentage. The percentage we have is 7.25%. 7.25% we know lies somewhere in between 7 and 7.5%. So this is really where we're going to look. And our number of payments has now been reduced to 12. We had 24, but we're paying it off early, so we're saving ourselves 12 payments. So for the number of payments, we're going to follow 12 instead of 24. We're going to go to the same percentage, 7.25%. So we go to 12 payments and we go down the line until we reach the two values that correspond to the 7 and 7.5%. Now we know that 7.25% isn't actually on our table here, so we can estimate the number of or our finance charge per $100 of amount financed based on that percentage. We know that at 7%, we would pay $3.83, and at 7.5%, we're going to pay $4.11. Since 7.25% is between those values, our answer for our value of H will be halfway between these two numbers here. So that's how we're going to calculate H. So let's go ahead and go back to our notes and calculate that out. All right, so we're back to our notes. We know that H is going to equal some dollar amount that corresponds to the 7.25% for the 12 payments. So we said that that's going to be halfway between $3.83 at 7% and $4.11 at 7.5%. And remember, this was for 12 payments. So we'll find the average of those values. So remember our average, we take each value, add them together, and divide by 2. So we'll take 3.83 plus 4.11, divide by 2. This value ends up giving us 7.94 divided by 2, which we can calculate that out to get $3.97. So that is going to be the value of H. So now we found the value of H. So we can go ahead and calculate our actuarial method and our rule of 78 now that we have all the information. So let's go ahead and start with the actuarial method. So our actuarial method, like we said, was U is equal to K RH divided by 100 plus H. So when we plug these values in, we'll have U is equal to K, which we said was 12, times R, our monthly payment, $67.34, times the value of H, $3.97. And we said this was all divided by 100 plus H, which was $3.97. So we can go ahead and find what that value is, plug these into our calculator. And when we do, we can simplify it a little bit. Our numerator will end up being 3,036.58 divided by 103.97. So now putting this into our calculator, rounding to the nearest 2 decimal places, because remember this is money, we should end up getting the value of $29.21. So that would be the value of the unearned interest that we used when we used the actuarial method. So now we can go ahead and try out the rule of 78. All right, so using the rule of 78, we have our formula. We have our finance charge times our payment left times K plus 1 divided by the number of our original payments times original payments plus 1. So we can go ahead and plug these values into our formula. We'll get U is equal to our finance charge, $116.16, times the number of payments we have left, times the number of payments we have left plus 1. So that's going to be that's going to be 13, 12 plus 1. And then we're going to divide by the original number of payments, 24, times 24 plus 1, which would be 25. So we have these values. We can go ahead and simplify. We should end up getting in our numerator 18,120 96 or 0.96 divided by 600. So we go ahead, same as before, plug this in our calculator, round to 2 decimal places to get $30.21. So we see that our actuarial method and our rule of 78 did not produce the exact same number, but their numbers were close. They were only $1 apart and probably roughly $30. So we would say we save about $30. So you save $30 when you paid an entire year early. This wasn't part of our question, but let's just go ahead and see how much did you end up paying to pay it off a year early? How much money were you really saving? So we can go ahead and calculate. This is typically going to be called the payoff. So our payoff would just be how much did we actually owe for the next year, meaning however many more payments you had times the amount per month. So we said that in all these values, our value of K was always going to be the remaining payments, not including the current one we had. Because basically we just took our 12th payment and just paid everything off. So when we calculate our payoff, we're really calculating more like this current payment and every payment after that. Because remember, this current payment would have been normal, and then you had 12 normal payments. When we found the value of K, we were saying how many more payments do you have, not including the current one. So now we're including the current and everything else. So this would be 13 payments. You would have 13 more payments of $67.34. So when you actually paid all this money off, you ended up about $875.42. So that's how much you paid off for the entire year. That's how much you paid off to save yourself $30. So maybe it's about $840 was probably better spent on something else, or maybe used for something else, or even towards savings or something like that, as opposed to trying to pay off your loan early just to save yourself $30. So it always sounds like a good idea to pay something off early, but it's always good to try to put in those calculations and really see how much you're really saving, because it always seems like a good idea, but when you actually put down the numbers, $30 compared to $800, I'm sure you could find a lot of things to do for $800. So there we go. That wraps up that example. Let's go ahead and go on back over to our lecture. All right, we finished our example, so let's move on. Lastly, we have the unpaid balance method. We've only covered examples of close-ended credit or credit with a fixed number of payments and a specific payoff date. We're now going to cover open-ended credit, where there are no fixed number of payments or a payoff date. This is also called revolving credit. This is the most common example for credit cards. You don't have to make a certain payment by a certain time. You just have to make minimum payments every specific amount of time, and it's open-ended credit. We use the unpaid balance method. The way interest is calculated on credit cards only charges interest on the balance from the previous month. So the unpaid balance method is used most often with credit cards, which the method itself we'll see on the next slide. We have a little clip here. We say the size of credit cards were in proportion to credit card debt. Everyone would be carrying around very large credit cards, or at least a lot of people would. So the average daily balance method is what credit card companies are typically going to use. We say if your credit card company uses the unpaid balance method, which most do, then you'll never pay any interest if you pay off your balance in full each month. Companies that issue credit cards are really not fond of this, so that's why they charge annual fees. Another way that they can make money from their users is to use the average daily balance method instead for computing the finance charge, so instead of the unpaid balance method. This way you can start paying interest the day that you make a purchase. So you start gaining interest as soon as you make that purchase, not just on the interest on the amount at the end of the month. So the procedure that's used, which is in 6 steps here, for the average daily balance method is step 1, you find the balance as of each transaction. So you have to find the balance of each transaction. Step 2, find the number of days for each balance. How many days was it basically living on your credit card? Step 3, multiply the balances by the number of days and find the sum. Step 4, divide the sum by the number of days in the month. Step 5, find the average charge, multiply the average daily balance by the monthly rate. And step 6, find the new balance, add the finance charge to the balance as of the last transaction. These are quite a few steps, and it would be required for you to, for every single transaction, do these 6 steps, which for a lot of people can be extremely tedious. So these are the steps. If it ever comes about that you need to use them, these are the steps. But we will not be going over a problem. It would probably take about another 30 minutes. So, all right, that's average daily balance method, and there are the steps for using it. That wraps up section 7.5. So in our section, we learn how to find the amount financed, the total installment price, finance charge for a fixed installment loan, use a table to find APR, compute unearned interest and payoff amount for a loan paid off early, compute credit card finance charges using the unpaid balance method and the average daily balance methods, and then study the effects of making minimum payments. So, all right, that wraps it up for section 7.5, and we'll see you in the next one.